Hello and welcome into the second ever episode of Around the Horns. I am Aaron. I am here with my co-host Zach. Zach, we got a lot to talk about today. We are, of course, here to discuss all things Texas baseball. And today we are going to cover the Alabama series over this past weekend. We'll touch on the game in Huntsville last night. And then, of course, at the end, we are going to preview the big weekend upcoming in Houston. So, Zach, how you doing on this? How you doing on Wednesday?
Good, doing great. Lots of great baseball played last night. A couple upsets. Shout out to D3 upsetting Iowa on the top of the order. But yeah, everything's going great.
Hey, so if we're gonna shout out D3 real quick, I am wearing my Hendrix baseball shirt. I'm an alumni. They're probably the only team in the country right now hotter than Texas. They're 11-0. So
Yeah.
shout out to all my friends there in Conway. But enough D3 talk. Let's get back to D1. Zach, we saw Texas complete another sweep this weekend. This time it was Alabama. We saw some closer games. That's kind of what we predicted. Aaron Nixon did indeed have to close out one. He was in a pressure situation. He came through. So there was a lot of baseball this weekend, 3 games, 2 of them were pretty close. So Zach, I'm going to let you start it off here with some of your main takeaways from the weekend. And I understand you also have an award to give out.
Yeah. So, the only guy that scored the run this weekend for Bama, DH Owen Diodati, got one up off Tanner Witt on Sunday, got it into the wind. I also have to give him an award, though, for the double sombrero, the rare 2 games in a row, striking out 3 times, for those that don't know what a golden sombrero is. But Bama, they played really good defense, and we knew that coming in. They returned a lot of experience on the infield. They've got some solid players on the outfield. Their pitching was much better than I actually anticipated. They hadn't really faced anyone of note yet. But they were solid. They obviously had some wind aid there. I think Pierce alluded to 4 to 5 home runs that were somewhat stolen by that breezy center field wind blowing in.
Yeah,
and then it was obviously quite cold. It was 38 one day, 40 and misting the next day. So the dish isn't easy, but the wind certainly played a factor there. I think they're a team that's going to steal some games in the SEC West, honestly. If McMillan can throw like he did for 6 to 7 innings, if Grayson Hitt can kind of continue doing what he's doing on the back end on Sundays, they've got a chance to kind of surprise some folks. So everyone predicted them to be 10 or 9, somewhere there at the bottom,
bottom of the pack.
I don't see it. I mean, they're better than Kentucky. They're better than probably Auburn from what I've seen. They're better than A&M. So shout out to the Bama folks. As far as Texas goes, I think it starts and ends with pitching. Hansen set the tone on Friday. Tristan, being the senior he was, came in and just did his thing on Saturday like he normally does. Quick rhythm. He had some guys get on base, but he's an experienced guy. He worked out of it. And then Tanner, his curveball went viral afterwards. He had that cutter. He had the curveball working. He was mowing down people, and it showed 9 strikeouts for a career high. He was amped up after the game. You could tell. So, and then from a hitting standpoint, as I said, the wind and the cold played a major factor, obviously. But Tulo's got those guys just locked in. They're taking deep counts. 6, 7, 8 pitches in an at bat. They don't care if it's 3-2. They don't care if they're down 0-2. That's where they kind of thrive. So it's cool to see them continue to develop that.
Yeah, no doubt. The patience has definitely been really good to see for the Texas offense. I definitely agree with you on Alabama. We watched Rice the weekend before in the walk fest that was that pitching staff. So that was kind of the main difference I saw with Bama is their pitchers weren't afraid to go in there and throw strikes. I know it's easy to do when it's, 35 degrees and the wind's blowing straight in an already big ballpark, but still credit to Bama for throwing a lot of strikes, keeping those games close. Speaking of the Texas ballpark, that was kind of works into my main takeaway from this weekend is Texas is really good at home. They're really good playing at the Dish. They were 32-5 last year at home. And when you think about this team, there were some concerns early in the year about how are we going to replace the power of like a Cam Williams, a Zach Zubia, some of those guys. Well, when I think about how you win baseball games at UFCU Disch-Falk Field, I think pitching, I think defense. We know Texas has those covers. And then we think about timely hits. And that's kind of what we saw all weekend out of Texas. They didn't hit any home runs this weekend. You mentioned they probably would have if not for the weather. But, this is a Texas team that if they take care of business at home, throughout the regular season. They're probably going to be hosting a regional. And then if they make it through the regional, they've got a good shot to potentially host a super regional. So if they can just win games at home, that might be enough to get them to Omaha. It'll be really impressive. And then when you get to Omaha, you've got another really big ballpark. So, in some of those parks, you don't need to hit a bunch of home runs. You can come up with clutch line drives, some really good defense and outfield that covers a lot of ground, which is one of my big takeaways from this weekend. So I really like that for Texas. Obviously, the pitching staff, the 3 starters are just money right now. That was a very impressive start from Tanner Witt, even though he did give up the only run of the weekend. The bullpen, I know we'll talk about that a little bit, but Travis Staley, Luke Harrison, Lucas Gordon, those guys are really impressive. They all had multi-inning outings, so they're showing they can, Coach Pearson get some length out of his guys in the bullpen. So those are a lot of my main takeaways from the weekend. You have anything to build off of any of those points there?
Yeah, I really like your point about UFCU Disch-Falk. One of the things that a lot of teams I've seen over the years just completely misplay is how big Omaha plays. Take Tennessee, for example, last year. They were a hot hitting team. They got to Omaha. I mean, there's good arms, obviously, in the last 8. But exactly. That park plays big. It's hard to hit a home run. I think Texas was one of the first teams to actually hit a home run out of the park. I mean, and that says a lot because it's just really hard. And when you have a team like Texas that plays gap to gap offense, you put EK, you put Hodo, you put Daly, they're hitting left, right, center. Like that's really hard to defend against. And that's where, one of the reasons I think Texas had so much success last year was the Arkansas mowing them down pitching wise and Mississippi State mowing them down. Like, notwithstanding, when they got hits, they were to the gap and they were able to put those runners on. So yeah, it's when you can play at home at like a Disch-Falk Field and be successful, it says a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there's just not going to be that many home runs, as you mentioned, the better pitching when you get deep into the season. Being able to control the gaps on defense, which the Texas defense will certainly be able to do. They've got a lot of speed in the outfield. And then, punishing the gaps on offense, you don't have to hit the ball over the fence. So yeah, we're definitely in agreement there. But all right, Zach, so let's give out some more awards. We're feeling really generous today, I guess. So we'll go back to one that we introduced last week. We'll do the Fun to Watch award. I see you've got a couple things jotted down here, so I'll let you take it away and give out some more awards.
Yeah, so you touched on it already, but true freshman Luke Harrison coming in, just locking it down after Tristan did on Saturday. He went 3 innings, got the complete game save or the save, and then redshirt freshman Travis Staley bouncing back from the elbow injury. He came in after Hansen on Friday and locked it down. So just those guys continue to pound the zone. Staley was showing more of a breaking ball, which is really nice to see. His first outing was basically strike on all of the fastball. And then Murphy Staley, continues to compete and push all the guys around him. He came into the year fighting for that third base spot. You can't take him out of the lineup. He's hitting what OPS is over 1, and he continues to hit. And then it was really cool seeing Tanner Witt's curveball go viral. So everyone's showing Texas some love over the weekend.
Yeah, it's always good to get some UT pitchers on Pitching Ninja, which Tanner Witt was plenty on Sunday. I definitely agree with you. The Luke Harris thing really stood out just in the context of Tristan Stevens went 6 shutout innings. He's a 5th-year super senior, and then he was followed up by a true freshman, Luke Harrison. So, I mean, Tanner Stevens, I don't have it in front of him, or Tristan Stevens, I don't have it in front of him. He's probably like 23 years old. Luke Harrison's probably like 18. There might be a 5-year, 4-year age gap between those two guys. So that's just super crazy whenever that can happen in college baseball. But yeah, absolutely. My Fun to Watch award is going to go to Tanner Witt. He's really just starting to become a really complete pitcher. I didn't know it would happen for him this early in his transition from the bullpen to being a starter, but he was doing a really good job of pitching backwards. What I mean there is he was flipping in curveballs for a strike early in the count. He was throwing changeups for a strike to left-handed batters. Then he was setting up his fastball really well. I made a comment about it in the press box, but there was a couple times during the game that he would throw a 72-mile-an-hour curveball or a 74-mile-an-hour curveball, and then the next pitch was a 92-mile-an-hour fastball or a 94-mile-an-hour fastball. So just a 20-mile-per-hour gap from pitch to pitch. The Bama hitters were off balance all day long. They didn't know what pitch was coming at any moment in any count because he was throwing them all for strikes. And that just showed itself. He had a career high 9 strikeouts and only 1 walk, which was really impressive. So, Yeah, Tanner Witt definitely is going to get my fun to watch award this past weekend. But yeah, Zach, you have anything else for the Bama series, or you want to move on to this massacre in Huntsville last night?
No, we're done talking about Bama until Texas football runs into that buzzsaw next year. So let's continue on.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. We don't have to talk about that right now. So last night, Texas went into Huntsville. This was a big deal in Huntsville. It was crawfish night. So what I mean by that is it was literally crawfish night in Huntsville, Texas. The Sam Houston baseball team, they gave out a lot of free crawfish to all the fans. They made it a big event. There was a huge crowd at their stadium last night, but the celebration quickly went south because Texas offense, kind of walked in there and stole the show. It had me thinking about some other, big celebrations, some events that did not quite go as planned, some that popped in my mind. I was getting a lot of vibes from the Red Wedding, so I'm not going to spoil it for anyone that somehow hasn't seen Game of Thrones yet, but yeah, Thrones fans will know what the Red Wedding was about. That kind of reminded me of the Texas Massacre last night. It was not really a celebration that Sam Houston thought it would be. And then another one, I don't know if you remember this, but the Celtics tried to retire Paul Pierce's jersey, or they did retire his jersey a couple of years ago. They tried to do it after the game, which is a pretty bold move because you never know what's going to happen. Yeah. They did it on a night where they were playing against the Cavs and LeBron James. And sure enough, the Cavs just beat them by like 25 points. LeBron had a big game. It was such a blowout that LeBron didn't even play in the fourth quarter. So he spent the entire fourth quarter on the bench laughing, making fun of things, just having a good old time. Meanwhile, a lot of the Celtics fans were like pouring out of the arena. So that was kind of a failed celebration there. But yeah, those were kind of the vibes I got. Zach, do you have anything that comes to mind as far as failed celebrations or events?
Yeah, I mean, I always think about the teams that like to throw the horns down, or like there's been a number of years where Texas plays A&M on a Tuesday night and they're getting rowdy and they're in the dugout, they're chirping hard and they're throwing the horns down, and then Texas just rips their heart out. So that's always great to see. Yeah, no, Sam Houston, record crowd for them, which speaks a lot to like college baseball in general, right? I mean, you got the number one team coming into Huntsville. That's always going to be a draw. But this is a team that's lost to Texas, 8 in a row now. They've always been competitive games for the most part, but it's not like Sam Houston has a record of upsetting Texas. Sam Houston was coming off a tough weekend loss to DBU, Dallas Baptist, after getting a Tuesday night win up in Dallas against Oklahoma State. So I kind of thought this would be a much tougher game last night. I thought there'd be a little more revenge, like, hey, let's pick ourselves back up after DBU. But, the Cats came in and just kind of got stepped on by Texas last night. So it was good to see Blair and Morehouse get some work. They definitely need to continue to get some work, especially we got big series coming up. Once we get into conference, it's a drag, man. You got to have those guys ready on the back end. But no, for the most part, like I just love seeing college baseball, how everyone's celebrating it right now, especially with the disaster that the major leagues are right now. So
yeah, I'm too sad to talk about the major leagues right now, but I absolutely agree, especially with your point about the back end, the relievers. Texas doesn't need those guys right now with the way that Harrison and Staley are pitching, but it's such a long season. You're not going to get 22 shutout innings out of your starting rotation every single weekend. So some weekends they're going to go deep into their bullpen, and it is nice to have those guys with a little bit of experience when they are called upon. Yeah, 2-out hitting was the story for Texas last night. Hodo was the ultimate leadoff guy. He had 3 hits. He had a walk. He stole a base. He was setting the table for all the big boppers behind him. And all those guys came through. I think the top 4 in the Texas order combined for 7 RBIs. So it's just good to see Texas handle business. Every single game they play this year, that's going to be the biggest game of the year for the other team. So the other team is always going to be locked in. They're always going to be fired up. They're going to try to beat number 1. They're going to try to take down Texas. And, that's hard to match energy throughout a 60, 56 game season. Yeah. So I'm just glad Texas is taking care of business, especially in these midweek games early in the season.
Yeah. And, coming into this year, a lot of people, hey, you lost Antico. He went 40 for 48 on stolen bases. He was your leadoff man. The Texas offense really, basically, he was the engine that ran it last year. You got to give props to EK. A lot of people were really down on him. Like, why is this guy starting at Texas? And, everyone could see the potential, It was just, he had a really rough year. You know, he got into that slump and he couldn't get out of it. He kind of busted out of it in Omaha at the College World Series, but this year, what is he hitting? 414 with an OPS of 10 or 105.2. I mean, he's killing it. I will say I was disappointed though last night. Texas ERA ballooned from 0.5 to 0.67. Unacceptable. I mean, come on, guys. So no, the Texas team continues just to really be dominant in all areas. You know, typically these number one teams, they come in, there's a lot of hype. There's always that Tuesday night downfall. Sam Houston's a good squad. They took 3 or 4 from Nebraska. Like I said, they upset Oklahoma State, who's top 4. Texas was having none of it. They're locked in, ready to get that road trip started down in Houston. So,
yeah. Speaking of the road trip in Houston, it's time we go ahead and talk about that. And with that, I'm going to introduce a new segment. It's going to be temporary. I can only really use it once this year, but you know, the calendar's flipped to March. March Madness is rolling around. A lot of fun college basketball coming up. And then, so Texas is heading to the Shriners Classic in Houston this weekend. So, Zach, I'm going to hit you with this new segment. One shrining moment. Texas going into Houston this weekend. So basically one shining moment. We're going to hit each game and we're going to give out some moments that might make the difference. We're going to break it down, do the preview, what we expect to see from each team. And with that said, Zach, I'm going to let you start it off with Friday night. You know, Texas, like you mentioned it, a rematch versus Tennessee. We saw that matchup in Omaha last year. That was the game Silas Ardoin made the crazy pick to get Tristan Stevens out of a jam there early in the game. So, yeah, Zach, what are we thinking about the Tennessee game? What are some things we might see from the Volunteers on Friday?
Yeah, I think you said it. Like, there's a lot of guys that remember that Tennessee game versus Texas up in Omaha. I think there's going to be some chirping. I think they're going to be really fired up to play Texas. I think everyone
let Trey Faltini get hit by a pitch. Do not let Trey Faltini get hit by a pitch on Friday. There might be chaos. Yep.
No, so I think everyone knows Tennessee's been hammering the ball. I mean, let's be honest. They played the worst team in the nation, Iona. What, they put 68 runs. I mean, this just outrageous. But they're number 6 in the nation in hits. They're number 1 in home runs. I think the most surprising part so far this year has got to be their pitching, though. They're still without their ace, Blade Tidwell. That dude's legit. But again, the level of competitions remains to be seen. This is their true first test. Chase Burns is going to step on the mound. He's a true freshman. He's going to get his third start. Big kid. He's 6'4", you know, looks the part, got a big arm. He has really good command. So there are not a lot of walks for Texas again this weekend. Texas is going to have to be patient. They're going to have to take it, grind it out. And then that first guy out of the pen is their senior do-it-all. He's kind of like the Tanner Witt of last year. He can start a game. He can relieve. He can close it out. So that's that Sewell. And Texas should remember him. He pitched 1.2 innings last year in Omaha, struck out 3, didn't allow a single hit. So, you know, Texas hitters will have a little revenge ready for him. But, you know, Texas needs Hansen to go 5+. They have to have Staley come in, do the fastball, pound the zone, use that curveball. And, you know, they're going to have to grind one out. I think, you know, we can get to predictions in a little bit, but I think this is actually the toughest game on the weekend for Texas. So,
yeah, this is definitely going to be a tough one. You know, you mentioned it's going to be a step up in competition for Tennessee. It definitely will be for Texas as well, especially, you know, for the starting rotation. I'm thinking about Pete Hansen. You know, he dominated a Rice team that, you know, we just don't think is very good. And then, you know, he pitched really well against Bama, but it was in a huge ballpark with the wind blowing in, very cold, very bad hitting conditions. So he's getting a huge step up against a Tennessee team that, like you mentioned, leads the league in home runs. And we're getting away from UFCU Disch-Falk Field. We're going to Minute Maid Park, where there's a short portion left. It's not a big park. It's indoors. The weather's going to be perfect. So I think that is going to be a really big test for Pete Hansen. I don't think he's going to be on cruise control like he has been his first 2 starts. He's going to have to trust his stuff in the zone because, you know, when Tennessee does inevitably put one in the gap or over the fence, you want that to be a solo shot. You want that to be a 2-run shot. You can't let that be a 3-run shot or a grand slam because you loaded the bases with walks because you were pitching around guys. So you still need to trust your stuff in the zone, but make sure you work all your pitches. He's been doing a lot of fastball slider. I think I want to see a little bit more changeups from him this weekend. Try to keep the hitters off balance, especially some of the power righties that Tennessee has in that lineup. So I'm going to be really focused on Pete Hansen in that game on Friday. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really fun one. With that, speaking of a big test for a Texas starting pitcher, Tristan Stevens is going to have his hands full with an LSU offense that has been killing it all year long. So Zach, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about LSU and what you think, how you think that Saturday game might play out.
Yeah, so Saturday's a really interesting matchup. You know, the fifth-year senior Hilliard for LSU is most likely going to get the start unless Jay Johnson starts tweaking with his starting rotation. I don't think he is going to be doing that yet. It's really hard to move a senior guy out of the Saturday rotation.
Yep.
But, you know, he struggled in his first 2 starts. He's a overhand fastball guy. He doesn't have a lot of velocity. He's upper 80s, low 90s. He has a 12-6 curve with a good bite, but like, he's not going to be throwing anything that Texas hasn't seen before and hasn't been able to hit. Their bullpen has really been all over the place this year. They've, you know, used a lot of guys. I think Jay Johnson, who's new to coaching LSU, is still trying to get used to what he has. I think the 2 guys will likely see Coleman and Gervais. And then another thing that could come into play is LSU hasn't been very good fielding. You know, They have a 949 fielding. They had 5 errors against Louisiana Tech up in Ruston. Granted, it was cold. You know, Texas had a couple errors when they were playing in the cold against A&M Corpus, but, you know, their third baseman, Cruz, he doesn't have the strongest arm. You're going up against a guy like Hodo, EK, Daly. These guys can get down the line. So if they can put pressure on the third base, I think that could, you know, really get the offense started. And then for Stevens, it's going to be about, he's got to keep his rhythm and he's got to keep his command. He's got to limit damage. So even if you get runners on base, don't let Cruz, don't let Barry, don't let Trey, you know, don't let those guys get going because they'll hurt you in a bunch. And I think the same thing for Hansen in the relief pitchers when the bullpen gets in there. Look, if you're going to give up an inning run, give up 1, give up 2. Don't give up a 3 or 4 spot because that's going to be really hard for the Texas offense to come back from. So,
yeah, I completely agree. You know, the Texas pitching staff has done a really good job of getting out of jams when they get in them. So, you know, they're going to be in some jams this week, and it'll be interesting to see if they can continue to come up big and, you know, get out of innings unscathed or just giving up 1 or 2 like they have throughout the year. You mentioned Dylan Cruz. His offensive numbers are crazy. He's hitting 483 right now with 1.546 OPS, which is just absurd. So it's definitely going to be a huge test for Tristan Stevens. So we know what Stevens is all about. He's got a really heavy 2-seam sinker that can get all the way up into the low 90s. He's going to want to work a slider off of that. The big thing for him is going to be those pitches play a lot better when they're low in the zone. You know, the sinker is going to have a lot more bite. It's going to have a lot more run when it's low. The slider is going to get more swing and miss. It's going to get a lot more weak contact when it's at the knees. So if he can be in the zone, but specifically around the knees at the bottom of the zone, don't be messing around with, you know, 2-seamers and sliders at the belt or, you know, at the chest. That's not going to work against this LSU team in this ballpark. So if he's able to kind of work to the knees, he'll get a lot of ground balls. He might get some big double play balls, but I think this is a one that could kind of turn into a high scoring game. You mentioned kind of the troubles that Hilliard's had for LSU. I think Texas could put up some runs against this LSU team, especially with the defensive issues you talked about. So I think this could turn into a wild one, and I'm really excited to see how this one plays out. But yeah, and then Sunday, a little bit of a different type matchup. We've got Texas taking on UCLA. That one will be in the afternoon for those people that will be tuning into the games. It'll be Tanner Wood on the mound, and then Zach, I'll let you talk a little bit about UCLA and your kind of first thoughts on what we might see on Sunday.
Yeah, for sure. So UCLA it's one of those squads that everyone's like, look, and early in the year, there's going to go through some struggles. They're going to have some trial and error. They're a super young team, but, you know, they brought in 3 freshmen that they somehow stole from the MLB draft. They're just uber talented. So, you know, like I said, they're young, but it's shown so far. They have had some success. They beat a talented Long Beach State on Tuesday, although Long Beach State dropped 3 of 3 to Sacramento State the weekend before. So, you know, the California, they always beat up on each other. Pitching wise, we're going to see redshirt sophomore Kelly Austin, one of those double name guys, right?
Yeah, there's no rules. 2 first names.
Yeah. You know, his first 2 starts, he went 6 innings each. He's been super, you know, he doesn't have electric stuff, but he's a hard thrower. He's got really good command. He's only issued, I think, 1 walk so far. And then I think if UCLA is able to keep him up until the Texas game, not have to use him earlier, Freshman Thatcher Hurd, that guy was electric against Long Beach State, 12 strikeouts, 5 innings. He's a true freshman. He's got an electric arm. So I think I really like what Witt brings against UCLA hitters. I think the cutter and the curveball are going to give him a lot of trouble. At the end of the day, Texas, they're too talented and too experienced to drop a game to UCLA. So,
yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I talked about, why it might be a step up in competition for specifically Hansen and Stevens. Even though they've been dominant, they might have to do things a little different or be a little more precise. I don't really think that's going to be the case for Tanner Witt. I mean, if he pitches, like he did on Sunday or even close to how he did on Sunday, he's not going to give up a lot of runs to pretty much any team in the country, because when you've got 4+ pitches that, are all really hard to hit at times and you're mixing them that well and you can throw them all in the zone, I'm not too worried about the ballpark. I'm not too worried about the opposing lineup, because when you've got a guy like Tanner Witt, who will probably end up being, a top tier MLB prospect by the time he leaves Texas, as long as he's in the zone, as long as he's getting ahead of batters, which he talked about being really important for him, I think he's going to do really well. I think it's a good matchup for him versus UCLA. So yeah, I think we both see Texas taking this one. So with that said, Zach, Texas is undefeated right now. A lot of people, there's going to be a lot of high expectations. There's going to be a lot of fans that are thinking sweep. I think the more realistic fans familiar with college baseball, are of the mindset that 2-1 would be a pretty good weekend for Texas.
yeah.
So how are you feeling, and what do you think, what do you think the record is coming out of this one in Houston?
Yeah, I think Texas is going to go 2-1. I don't see a sweep. There's a lot of talent, a lot of hitting talent out there. Not that Texas is due for a bad game, but anything can happen. I think the way it's going to go down is Texas loses that game 1 to Tennessee. Tennessee's going to be super hyped. And I think Texas builds off of that and comes back and hammers LSU and UCLA. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Successful weekend all around.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm also thinking 2-1. I think they're going to lose either Friday or Saturday. I haven't quite pinpointed which one. I think Friday is going to be a tight one that could really go either way. And then I could see Saturday, like I said, just turning into like a 9-8 or 10-11 ball game that just comes down to some really big moments late in the game. I think Texas will probably split those first two, and then I think Tanner Witt probably is going to have a really good nice day on Sunday, and Texas will come away with the win there, and everyone will feel good.
I don't trust the LSU bullpen yet. I mean, they got Fontenot on the end, but outside of that, there's a lot of question marks out there. So
yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That's why I think it could get wild. I'm really excited to watch all the games this weekend. I'll be there in Houston at Minute Maid. I know you wish you could be, but you got some fun plans also for the weekend. So
for sure.
Yeah, it'll be a good time. So, all right, Zach and I are in agreement. We both think Texas is going to go 2-1 this weekend. We've been pretty spot on with our predictions so far this year. So that's a good sign for the Longhorns. Unless you're expecting a sweep, then, you're hoping that we're wrong. So Zach, contrary to popular belief, or at least belief on this show, there are other teams in the college baseball world outside of the University of Texas and their opponents. So I'm going to let you take us through some things that you saw this weekend around the country, maybe some Big 12 teams. So yeah, what's going on around the country?
Yeah, I think everyone's talking about him, but at this point, just start off with Tommy Tanks, 9 home runs, 29 RBIs. I think it's his birthday today, actually. The guy.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Just ridiculous. I mean,
it's
just
his birthday.
Unbelievable. So but no, while he's as good as advertised, I think I'm really looking forward to that ACC matchup at the end of the season between NC State and Wake Forest, or Rake Forest, as some like to call them.
Yep.
Those are two teams that can hit. And I mean, why, don't even bring a pitcher to that series. Let them just play BP and have a home run derby. I mean, that's what we're all waiting for. So, Maryland continues to impress as the class of the Big Ten. Iowa got dumped, like I said, by a D3 squad. Nebraska looked really shaky again. They got pretty well worked over by TCU. Arkansas surprisingly has struggled on offense. I think the freshmen look like freshmen. I don't think there's anything to massively worry about at the end of the season, but they got to get it going if they're going to contend in the SEC West. And then Landon Syms, he's got to be the best 2-loss pitcher in the nation, right? That guy, I don't know how they keep dropping games. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's reminding me a lot of Jacob deGrom. It's kind of an ongoing joke to where the Mets would always find a way to lose Jacob deGrom starts. They would either score no runs or they would score 1 run, DeGrom would go 7 scoreless, and then the bullpen would blow it. And
Yeah.
that's definitely exactly what's happening to Landon
Mississippi
Sims right
State's
now.
blown 2 games of his. Yeah, it's crazy. Yep. And then circling back to the Big 12, TCU, as I mentioned, Sarluska, they have them off to a good start. They've looked really good. Their pitching is stronger. Austin Krob has looked great. I may have underestimated them a little bit. I think they could easily supplant Tech this year in the rankings that I had. OU continues to be solid. Skip Johnson, it seems like, finally has his pitchers working. And then West Virginia, of all the teams, they've looked awesome. Davis and their other outfielder, who I can't think of his name, those guys have been hitting hard, and their pitching has been decent. So they could surprise some folks in the Big 12 series.
Yeah, no, I really like all that. One thing, so, at the beginning of the year, it was Tommy Tanks, and then it was Tommy Taters. We keep going back and forth. I guess we've settled on Tommy Tanks. I don't think I agree with that. I think Tommy Taters is like the cooler, more unique nickname. Which one do you like more?
I like Tommy Taters. I mean, he's just, the dude's mashing.
Yeah, no, he is mashing. So it should be Tommy Taters, since he's mashing baseballs. You can call him Thomas Potatoes if you want to be more formal. That's what I wish it would go. But yeah, enough of that. That was a good, broad, very, very good overview from you from around the country. I'm going to take a little bit more of a narrow approach in what I saw this weekend. And I'm just going to give a big shout out to my Penn Quakers. They took 2 out of 3 in College Station. I've always been a huge Quakers guy. I've been a Penn baseball fan since day one. But, in all seriousness, it was a really impressive weekend for Penn. They haven't played baseball in a very long time. They're in the Ivy League. And, as a former player, a Division III player, I know it can be really hard to stay focused and bring a lot of energy when you go to really depressing cities. They can kind of be in the middle of nowhere. They just drag the energy out of you. You don't feel like playing baseball. And, that's what happened to Penn this weekend. They had to go to College Station. It's miserable. It's no fun. But credit to them. They showed a lot of mental toughness. They were able to overcome it. And they took 2 out of 3 from the Aggies. So, yeah, good for them. They took advantage of the miserable surroundings and everything else that Aggie land does not have to offer.
Yeah, the Ivy League, they were the first conference to shut down baseball due to COVID in 2020. They didn't play at all last year. So 719 days between games or between wins. I can't remember which one. A&M pitching, ouch. They gave up 5 runs in the top of the 9th to lose. I think it was game 1. A&M bounced back with a 5-0 shutout on Saturday, but shout out to Penn. The Quakers got it done. And even if one of their players was clapping coming off the plane, I hear so.
Yeah, oh man. So I feel horrible for A&M. Just so tough to see them lose to Penn. Just such a shame.
Such a shame.
You really hate to see it. But yeah, so that's going to wrap it up. Make sure you guys tune into a lot of Texas baseball over the weekend. This team is really fun to watch. While you're at it, you can follow us on Twitter. You can find me on there at Aaron Little OB. You can find Zach on Twitter at Zach at the Dish. We're both giving updates throughout games. We're talking Texas baseball throughout the week, giving out stats, all kinds of stuff like that. Check out our coverage on Orange Bloods, orangebloods.com. We've got game recaps going. Zach has got preview pieces. He's got around the country updates. We've got the live game day threads. We've got all kinds of stuff over there on Orange Bloods. As far as this YouTube goes, subscribe, comment, tell us, some of your favorite things from around the country this weekend. Weigh in on the Tommy Tanks versus the Tommy Taters debate. Give me some good places to check out in Houston this weekend. But yeah, Zach, you have anything else to say to the people before I take us out of here?
Hit up Pinkerton's Barbecue in Houston and nice. Go see some great baseball. So
yeah, should be a really good weekend. So, all right, that's going to do it for another episode of Around the Horns. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will be back next week to talk more Texas baseball. So, yep, hook 'em.
Hook 'em.